The cape was just giving Little Red Riding Hood, so we're going to lose that. Do you mind? Tell everyone to like and subscribe.
They ask you how you are, you don't just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine.
Before this video begins, I just want to put off a quick disclaimer. There will be mentions of blood, decomposition, and referencing to killing of babies. If you do not like these type of topics, I understand. This is probably not the video for you, and probably not the next one, but maybe the next one will be. So make sure you still like and subscribe so you can hear more about spooky topics that interest me and hopefully will interest you. When you think of vampires, what do you think? Well, if you've consumed any sort of supernatural pop culture in the last 20, 30 years, you probably think about vampires as being beautiful, eternally youthful individuals tormented by their own existence. Usually, there's a love triangle. Maybe it's a vampire and a werewolf and a teenage girl. Or maybe it's two vampires and a teenage girl. Usually there's a teenage girl involved because they're usually in high school. But what if I told you that that concept of a vampire is relatively new, going back maybe 100 years or so? My name is Dam Reed. Welcome back to my channel. I know it's been a while, but we'll move on from that. Today we are going to be talking about vampires, the origins and the history and the different folklore that's found across the world. One of the first representations of vampire legends dates back to ancient Mesopotamia. A vase found in what is now Iran depicts a man struggling with the creature who is trying to suck his blood, or so we think. Texts dating back to the 7th century BC reference Lamastu or Dime in Sumerian. I don't know if that's the correct pronunciation, but we're going to go with that. Dime was the daughter of the god of heaven and the sister to goddess of sex, fertility, and war, Ishtar. Lamastu, or Dime, I'll probably go back and forth between the two, is described as having the head of a dog or a lion, teeth of a donkey, having leopard spotted skin, loose hair with her nips out. She is believed to create nightmares, kill babies, and drink the blood and eat the flesh of men. Through expansion of territories and invasions, and acculturation, that doesn't sound right. The folklore of vampires and vampire-like creatures were able to persist and spread through the preservation of texts and oral tradition. Fast forward a little bit, vampire legend and folklore really popped off with Christianity and colonialism, especially in the Slavic region. Vampire folklore varies regionally, but was very widespread in Europe during the Middle Ages. Generally, the belief that was that restless or malicious spirits would possess corpses and then rise from the grave to harass the living. This could be through sucking their blood, causing plagues, or just general mischief. While during this time Roman Catholicism was the largest religion, it was not the only religion. And during the tumultuous Reformation period, pagan mortuary customs were able to infiltrate Christian funeral rites, so long as Christian rituals were maintained. But we're going to put a pin in that because we're going to talk about more. At this point, the idea of the vampire was an unclean spirit occupying a corpse. A soul that was deemed unclean based on the actions or appearances of the living or the manner in which they died. For example, sinners or witches would be considered at risk for coming back as a vampire or vampiric possession. Or those who died a heretical death, aka a bad death. such as suicide or individuals that were murdered or placed in a shallow grave. There is an emphasis placed on proper burial. Again, we will talk about that later in the next video. A potential vampire could also be clocked through physical appearances, like a baby born with its teeth or someone who has a physical disability. Once these individuals have transformed into a vampire, they will take on a ruddy or bloated appearance. Sometimes blood will appear around the mouth as if it was freshly drinking blood. 3 different types of vampires are found in Slavic folklore. They are the eretic, erestun, and eretica. Heretic is a sorcerer or heretic who had died and then returns as a vampire as a result of the soul uncleansed from its sins. Erestan, an evil sorcerer spirit that possesses a body at the moment of expiration. Erotica, I'm going to put the spelling at the bottom because I'm probably saying these wrong. Eretica, a woman who sold their soul to the devil. During the day, she appears just as an old haggish woman, but at night changes form and dances around, then falls asleep in sunken graves, living her best life. I don't see anything wrong with that. In other regions, such as Ireland, Celtic groups would talk about vampire-like creatures dating back to 1000 CE, which the church would use as a fear tactic in an attempt to convert the serfs to Christianity, as they would fuse the idea of undead creatures with the idea of the afterlife and salvation. Pre-Christianity, there was the tale of Abertag, this is Celtic, so I'm definitely pronouncing that wrong, who was the king of Glenulin, among several others. Legend says the Abertach was a dwarf with physical deformities who was evil and powerful, like a sorcerer. He murdered by another king who rose from the grave in search of blood to revive his body. Come here. Kitty came to see. What do you have to say about vampires? And you heard it here first from Sparks. I swear she loves me. Tell everyone to like and subscribe. I swear she loves me. Anyway, where was I? Legend says the Abertach was a dwarf with physical deformities who was an evil and powerful sorcerer. He was murdered by another king, but then rose from the dead in search of blood to revive his body. A local druid determined that Abertach was in fact not living, and could also never die. Now let's travel down south to a place called Greece. You've probably heard of it, famous for their olive oil, the Olympics, etc. Vampire folklore in Greece kind of focuses around the treatment and respect for the dead, and vampires have not yet received forgiveness, nor are remembered by the living. Orthodox Greeks believe there is a 3-year cycle of purification after death, through which the soul will go through judgment to decide what happens to it. During this time, the living must carry out proper mourning. If the family did not do their part, then the soul is unable to join the gods, and as a result, they will become chained to their vessels, which means they can also return from their graves as a vampire and create chaos. Lamia, according to Greek myth, was the queen of Libya. She is the personification of the country and has been recorded as the daughter of Poseidon. Zeus does what Zeus does and had an affair with Lamia, producing several children. Jealous, Hera killed all but one of the children. So Lamia said, "Oh, so we're killing kids now. Well, I can do that too." Lamia is described as being half human, half snake, and would seduce men in order to drink their blood while they slept. Another vampire-like woman in Greek myth is Impusa. Impusa are demons said to be children of Hecate or Hecate. who have one leg, maybe made out of copper, and maybe a donkey leg, but can adopt the form of a beautiful woman. Again, they would seduce men and drink their blood as they slept. Later folklore talks about, I'm not going to be able to say this one.
Viracalakas.
Viracalakas. I'm sorry. Malevolent are malevolent undead creatures. Similar characteristics to that of Slavic vampires in the sense that it doesn't drink blood so much as it is a nuisance to society and spreads plagues. One could become a Virakalaka if they did not adhere to Christian values or they were buried improperly, like if they were buried too deep or too shallow or left unattended. Additionally, if you had red hair or blue eyes, you would be at risk of becoming one, or if you were an individual who had a disability. They are described as being gorged with blood, giving a swollen appearance and having red or black skin. Vampires were big in Europe. However, there are tales of vampire-like creatures all across the globe. In India, there was a group of evil demigods that had 2 fangs and drank blood from skulls, called Rakshasa. In Hindu folklore, they aren't explicitly vampires, as I don't think they are mortal, but are considered vampire adjacent. Peru has the Pistako. There's no way that's how it's spelled. I'm so sorry, Peru. Who were wealthy men that would capture natives to collect their fat by cutting their throats and hanging them. Indonesia has the Kuntilanak, that are fierce demons with long black hair, sharp nails, and a pregnant belly. Some variations say that she drinks blood from virgins, while others say she died an unfortunate death but came back for revenge, and when she is staked, she will turn back into a beautiful woman. Kind of seeing similarities into the white woman, the ghost, the woman in white. She's often a victim of some kind of unfortunate circumstance and comes back for revenge. Now that we've talked about the folklore, let's talk about some of the themes in the lore of the legend and the reasons behind the myth as to why vampires and vampire-like creatures have been able to persist so long throughout time. While many legends predate Christian dominance, myths and legends of vampires really utilized by the Catholic Church as a method of control. We can see this from Greek, Slavic, and Irish lore. This period of time was especially chaotic. It was violent, and health and sanitation was widely unknown. So, as a result, a lot of people were dying, and death was unpredictable, creating a lot of fear. Superstition provided a way to help cope and understand why these things were happening. Additionally, the church was able to utilize these superstitions and use the fear to their advantage. With the serfs in Ireland, it was a way to convert them, while in the Slavic region, it was more about controlling behaviors. The church was able to utilize this fear as a way to enforce their views of permissible behavior. If you didn't want your body to be possessed by an evil spirit and come back and wreak havoc, then you would abide by the church doctrine. And if you went against the church, you were at risk of transforming and thus being excluded from Christian burial rites, which would prevent you from moving on to heaven or whatever comes after. So let's put a quick pin in that and talk about some characteristics of vampires. Common things that we know about vampires from media and stories. They don't like the sun, it makes them weak or turns them to ash. They don't like garlic. Some legends have that. They are repelled by holy water or other holy relics, like a cross and silver. And they have super strength, aren't super fast. Oh, and they can be killed by a stake to the heart, fire, or beheading. Now keep those things in mind. Peak vampire panic. I say the word panic, but that would imply that it was like incredibly widespread, but there was fear, and the fear was real to people at this time, but it wasn't as widespread as some media may suggest, which we are going to get more into in the next video. So anyway, at the peak of this panic, there was lots of plague and disease due to a lack of understanding about health and sanitation. They didn't understand how disease spread or the processes of the body after death. And if we see how they describe vampires as looking, we can see similarities between that and the processes of decomposition. They would have been described as being ruddy and bloated, much like a body after bacteria has caused all of, I apologize, this is going to get graphic. It's going to purge and push fluids out of the body as the body decomposes. Others propose medical theories. Porphyria is a blood disorder that results in the body producing less heme. Symptoms include sensitivity to light resulting in disfigurement or blackened skin, receding gums, and an aversion to garlic. As a result, the individual may avoid going out in the sun, and the receding gums may result in a fang-like appearance. The garlic thing is apparently due to sulfur contact, which can cause an attack of the disease. Apparently, for this particular disease, physicians would recommend their patients to drink blood as a treatment. So the theory would make sense in a way, but it is controversial because we don't need to be demonizing people with legitimate medical problems, and we know vampires are not real. At the time, it was a real fear, which can result in the marginalization of sick individuals. We hit Enlightenment, science and reason took over superstition, and the fears lessened around vampires. And with the Romantic period of literature, we see a shift in the vampire myth. Rather than being scary, evil demons or ghosts, they were now beautiful, young, ethereal beings. With books like Carmilla and Dracula that humanizes the vampires rather than demonizing them. And this is the way that vampires are still represented in our media now, often having them being framed as heroic, and they have tortured pasts from which they are trying to repent from, and then getting into love triangles with teenage girls. Well, that's it. And that's all I have. I apologize, I spent a lot of time looking at my script because it was a lot to remember, and I have a lot of scripts written out right now, so I can just record them and get them done. For our next video, we are going to continue with the vampire theme, but we're going to talk more about vampire burials, or anti-vampire burials would be more accurate. But if you want to know more about that, you will have to make sure you are like and subscribed in order to follow these series. Once again, I am Dam Reed, and thank you so much for watching.